Hey everyone, Mikamu here. This time talking about Sword and Shield, Pokemon, Game Freak. I know everyone's had different takes on this issue. I'm not here to complain, just to talk about things and have a discussion. And with me today is my good friend E. He's played Sword and Shield, so he has some opinions on that. As you know, I'm a guy who plays Pokemon ROM hack, so I have opinions on Pokemon as well. So, yeah, let's just dig in. What do you think about Sword and Shield so far?
So I'm about 100 hours in, and by 100 hours in, I mean I finished the entire game, like the campaign. I decided to finish the Pokedex, so me and a couple friends worked together, finished the Pokedex, and now those of us still playing it are shiny hunting and building competitive teams. And I've had a lot of fun with it, but I also have a lot of complaints, and I'm still kind of stuck on if I'm overall positive or negative on it. I'm like kind of in the middle right now.
So, what's your take on the controversy? Do you think it's overblown? Do you think that it's warranted?
Are you like specifically the national dex part, or like all the rest of it? Like, what do you want to focus on first?
I think the National Dex kind of blends into everything else, especially if you. I know it's kind of contended if you take the interviews. Like some people are saying it's out of context if you assume that Game Freak said that they would be cutting Pokemon in order to render better animations. I don't really know exactly which. People are fighting over translations, basically, right?
Yeah, from what I could gather from the translations, like the stuff I saw, it's like they were they were saying multiple things were the reasons. Like they wanted to work on better animations. They also wanted to work on balancing the game. And to be honest, I think that the balancing the game is the strongest reason for why they cut the decks. Because at first, cutting from like nearly 900 Pokemon down to 400 seems like a big cut.
A Thanos snap, basically.
Yeah, Thanos snap. But at least from the competitive side of playing Pokemon, I really appreciate what they did. They got rid of like a lot of Pokemon I liked, but Pokemon that I feel like power crept all the older Pokemon in the series. Like they got rid of stuff like Magearna or Kartana or a lot of the Mega Evolutions. Pokemon that were like conceptually cool looking, but their stats were ridiculous. They had crazy abilities, and it made other Pokemon that were older that I found interesting and had kind of cool niches. They're kind of viable now, and I really appreciate the work they went through on picking what Pokemon were in Galar.
Yeah, I think this is definitely like one of the greatest redistributions of the meta we've ever seen. I mean, just thinking about the number of Pokemon has been more than half, but if you look at it from a meta standpoint, even though there's some old power creeps there like Tyranitar, I think that for beginners, this is definitely the most meta-friendly change that has happened in a long time. So that in some ways is kind of exciting. So you think that the most reasonable assumption is that they did this to cut to kind of improve the meta? Maybe not improve, but make it a bit more easy to deal with.
I feel like I wouldn't say it's like particularly better than anything else, but because of the changes, it makes a lot more stuff viable and more interesting. Because like I feel like for the past 2 generations, I've been using the same Pokemon in higher tiers. Like if you want to play singles or even VGC, like you see a lot of the same Pokemon over and over again, and
Right.
I feel like they gave chances for other Pokemon to exist. Like, and it also helped the new Pokemon exist. Like Corviknight was basically replacing the same spot that Skarmory existed, because it's like a tanky steel flying type, just like Skarmory was, with a slightly different moveset. But it's a new Pokemon, and I wanted to try a new Pokemon, and it fills a similar niche. And I appreciate the opportunity to play with newer Pokemon and not just the same old staples I've been using for the past 10 years.
It was pretty interesting to hear you say, because a lot of the people who have been talking about the intriguing aspect of new Pokemon have been mostly, I think, non-competitive players.
Yeah.
But that is a very good point that, this in terms of competitive battling means that we get to see a variety of teams as opposed to simply the same meta teams we've seen for the last 3 generations. So would you say this is like a overall positive or a negative or a neutral? You're kind of in the middle.
So, I'm mostly positive. I still have some concerns about how the meta will turn out. Like the concept of Gigantamax and Dynamax seems a little broken, and I feel like
But not much different from Mega Evolutions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of fills the same niche as Z moves and Mega Evolutions.
Yeah.
And you could, of course, have stipulations where you maybe prevent battles where you use those features too.
Yeah, if you want to.
Right.
And I also appreciate, like, because Gigantamaxing doesn't have, like, held items and stuff, like, moves like Trick or Knockoff, like, they have the proper uses that they actually had beforehand, because
Right.
at last generation, it was, like, a third of your team was immune to that, and it's like, well,
Right.
I have less value for certain moves that I found, like, interesting niche moves, and the change to everybody being able to Dynamax and everybody having held items gives you more diversity in what moves you select and why you selected them.
Pretty cool, yeah. So, what other takeaways do you have from Sword and Shield?
Well, my biggest issue with the game is how streamlined it is, and by that I mean, like, I feel like the map design is very simple. The story is very simple. I know it's a Pokemon game, and you're not going in there for, like, an epic story like most JRPGs, but I feel a lot of the writing was very weak, even for Pokemon, like, especially compared to stuff that I saw in Gen 5, and even some things in Gen 6.
Everybody's been talking about Gen 5 of this game. Like, everyone's...
Kind of true, though. Like, my friend group I think most of us have decided that Gen 5 and 3 are our favorite Pokemon games. Like, we've played all of them, and, like, I still love Gen 1 and 2. I really appreciate the stuff they did in Gen 4 with adding online, or the way they separated physical and special, like the way they changed up how playing the game works. But I feel like Gen 5 perfected the 2D style.
Yeah.
And the way they dealt with story and the way they dealt with difficulty was not matched since then.
That makes sense. I mean, Pokemon is very iterative. Like, you have aggregation of features. Like, Gen 4's physical special split is very important to the meta, right? So, I mean, every game is comparable in the sense that they all have the basic features that make a Pokemon game, but they're unique in that I think they have their own contributions to the series as a whole. And some people are saying that Gen 5 especially has features that haven't really been implemented in the series since then. I don't really know if that's true. Personally, I stopped playing Pokemon around Gen 4. Gen 3, I think, is, for me, like, one of the best generations. Gen 2 is my favorite just because a lot of my favorite Pokemon come from that generation. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I noticed when I was younger, though, is that even though Pokemon's iterative, they do sometimes remove features. I mean, obviously, the Mega Evolutions removed from this generation are like an example of that. But even going back from Gen 2 to Gen 3, for example, the day-night cycle was removed, even though there is a clock in the game still. I don't really know why that was. But basically, it's interesting to see exactly how Game Freak has chosen to evolve the Pokemon series. And would you say that, like, Sword and Shield's a step back or a step forward, or?
It's a step sideways.
Yeah.
The best way to put it is, like, they've done so many new quality of life changes that I appreciate more than anything else in Pokemon. But then they've also just removed things or not brought back things that
has
could have easily been
always
there.
confused me. I mean, like, again, like I was saying, like, the Pokemon series is iterative, but sometimes features are completely lost, and it's kind of weird to see what features are lost and what decisions were made. But Game Freak's never really been transparent. I'm not really complaining, but they have not been transparent about how their development cycle goes, how they decide on things. So it's kind of up to us as fans to speculate exactly what's behind, the scenes, what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, like, on the whole, you're still kind of torn about Sword and Shield?
Yeah, so, like I said, the story's kind of weak, but I also really like the, what are their names? The new rivals that you have. Like,
Right.
I like their designs.
Hal
I-
and
Yeah, no, Hop, Marnie, and Bede.
Okay.
So like, I mean, I don't like Bede's like original design, but he changes later in the game, and I really appreciate it. And I like Hop actually kind of has an arc,
the
and
character
I
progression, right?
yeah, he has actual character progression, and it's like he starts off as like Hal, which is one of the worst rivals in my opinion. That's the Gen 7.
I don't know why. I guess because all the animation videos have been speculating that Hop and Hal are the same animation.
Oh, they are definitely the same animation. It's like he has the exact same like hand thing. Like you can try to like sure there's work done in, but I swear to God, there a lot of stuff was just copied and
Look,
pasted.
I don't think it's bad for Game Freak to. I mean, since we're on the topic, I don't think it's bad for Game Freak to reuse animations. But what I think is, speaking as somebody who I'm not heavily invested in the controversy, as I just admitted, I stopped playing Pokemon like continuously after Gen 4, but to see them, in light of say the Pokemon Home controversy, which is what is fueling, I think, the National Dex controversy, it's not clear where the work for the game has gone into. I mean, in terms of the development cycle.
sorry.
Just to lay out the scene. I'm not saying this to put Game Freak down, but we know Game Freak their senior development staff was working on a game called Little Town Hero. So they were kind of developing this game with one hand behind their back, and I'm assuming a lot of these changes were just simply to streamline the development cycle, right? It's easy to reuse animations. If they did reuse the Pokemon's, the vectors or whatever, like, it made development easier for them, and they're developing at half capacity. So I get why they would do it, but it's not a good look when they're kind of not transparent about this or the reasons behind the National Dex cut in light of all of these kind of animation and graphical limitations.
Well, playing through the game, like the alleged reused models and reused animations don't really bother me that much. The issue more comes down to I've been playing, even specifically on the playing RPGs on the Switch that look better than this, that are animated better than this, and Pokemon has always it's not the best looking game, but it's always been on handheld. But now that it's on a console that's powerful enough for other RPGs, you can really see the disparity. Like I just played through Dragon Quest XI before I played this, and it's not the most beautiful game, especially since it's the Switch port of the PS4 version, so you can see the difference between them. But comparing that game to Pokemon, I'm like, the Pokemon looks so much worse at some points, especially when you're in the wild area, because if you're online, your frame rate dips horribly, and the trees look terrible, and
everybody's talking about the trees.
it looks bad. But if I'm playing the game, I'm not really caring too much about how it looks.
Again, I think most of these concerns aren't because like the game's bad, but it's sort of like, if I were to hand in a paper, right, and it's all wrinkled up, I could be like, like the most like Einsteinian guy in the room, but like no one could read my writing and my paper is all kind of messed up. It kind of detracts from my credibility. I think people are still enjoying the game. I think that Pokemon's still a good series, but there's some touches here and there that are kind of lacking, that are kind of a little bit concerning, especially in light of like, we don't really know where the development time went, especially given that, they supposedly didn't have to work on so many Pokemon models, right?
Yeah.
Even if you assume that the cutting of the Pokemon wasn't to improve on animations and graphics, this the changes we got in Sword and Shield, they're comparable to the iterative changes we've seen in other titles, and yet the development cycles in those titles allowed time for including all the Pokemon. So there's still some sort of, there's a bit of a tension there, I guess, is kind of what most people are saying.
I feel like the extra effort in development was put into stuff that most players won't care about, which is going to be the quality of life improvements or the competitive improvements. Like they've gone out of their way to make certain things way more tolerable than it used to be in Pokemon. Like They made breeding way better with shorter cycles, giving you multiple daycares, giving you specifically areas that make it easy to ride your bike a lot so that you can farm eggs. They made it way easier to share teams so that people can just rent teams and try them online. They made it way easier to get natures with nature mints, so you don't actually have to breed for nature. You can just give your Pokemon the mint and it will grow the way that you want it to.
Wow, yeah. This might be like the most meta competitive friendly Pokemon.
Yeah, like every Pokemon game at the end at the beginning of the cycle, I'm like, I kind of want to play this
competitively.
Yeah, I want to play this Pokemon game competitively, or at least
try
to.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
it's so time consuming.
Yeah, like I'll start building a team, and I was like, oh, I remember Gen 6. I was like, I'm going to breed an Aegislash, and I'm gonna breed, and I'm like, after 100 hours, I had an entire 6-man team of what I wanted to play, and I was like, oh, this team works, it's kind of cool, but I might want to change something, and like, oh, changing one thing means I need to breed a whole new Pokemon, and that's gonna take me another 20 hours. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of gatekeeping to the more advanced features of Pokemon, which is, I think, the reason why, historically, just a lot of people weren't into competitive Pokemon. It's just a way of playing Pokemon that the vast majority of the player base will never experience. But I'm hoping with Sword and Shield, the one positive I think that many of us can agree on is maybe we might see more people dipping their toes into the meta, at least maybe online. I'm not saying that people are going to compete in tournaments and stuff, but
yeah,
that's another thing. But
yeah, I feel like there's a chance that more people are gonna play doubles and battle spot online, like actually in game, and not just use simulators, because they can actually have a team and play with it online.
I remember my first kind of entry into competitive battling. I was like maybe 11 or 12 years old. It was like Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Reading a FAQ on GameFAQs, and was like, here's some algebraic formulas you could use to calculate, how to grow your EVs. And I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So to have, Sword and Shield make it easy to breed for EVs, IVs, natures, it's a pretty great time to be getting into competitive, unless you're going to be playing on Showdown or something.
Yeah, like, right. They also changed it so that the vitamins you use for training your Pokemon that like start EV training, they can fully hit the stat. Like, you don't have to EV train at all. You can just buy like 26 proteins and give it to your Pokemon, and it's fully EV trained in attack.
Wow, nice.
And it just costs money to get it, and you can just grind the money and give your Pokemon all the vitamins it needs, and then you'll instantly have a fully EV trained Pokemon. So like, I currently have like 4 or 5 Pokemon fully bred with like near perfect IVs for what I wanted to do, and I have vitamins ready. I just need to level them up and get them ready for competitive. But I don't know what I want to do because there's so many new Pokemon I want to use.
Right.
So I'm like in the state of, what do I want to actually play? And I haven't had that in a long time, because before this it's always been like, okay, I have to run these 2 or 3 Pokemon on a team, and now it's like I can run almost anything in this new meta that they've developed.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I'm not too much of a competitive battler, but I do think, again, like, it's a great opportunity. Just speaking on, like, the Sword and Shield is definitely a mixed bag, but where we can, kind of give praises to the development team is and making a game more accessible, even if that came sort of at the expense of some people's favorite Pokemons. So, like, what do you think about relative to the home kind of controversy?
So,
did you have any teams you're going to import, or no?
Well, on most of my games, I have like a couple Pokemon that I would want to import for team purposes, but for the most part, I just wanted to have access to all of my old favorite Pokemon. But I don't care if they're on the cloud or in the game, as long as I have access to them at some point.
What do you think about, because some people have talked, and I really share the sentiments that if they're paying for a home, they should at least understand what they're paying for, right? Because if they can't import their Pokemon into a future game, or they won't know when, right? The next Gen 9 might be like
3 years from now.
Right, and the other thing too is they may not have all the Pokemon.
Yeah.
Right? They might continue this trend of not telling us who gets into the game until the very last day before launch, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you feel about it?
I have a feeling they're gonna keep up this trend because we have a lot of Pokemon, and that keeping track of over 900 Pokemon with like 1,000 moves and all individual animations and how everything interacts is a crazy amount of content, and I understand why they cut it. But like the tagline of the series has always been "Gotta catch them all." So like the people who actually have had the opportunity to actually catch them all and taking that away from them because they don't have access to those Pokemon, I understand why they're hurt. And like I have like a couple shinies that I care about that I have on old games, or like I have Pokemon all the way back from Gen 3 that I've actually transferred up through 4 games that I cared about, like my very first Mudkip that I caught when I was like 10 years old. A little older than that, like 13 years old. I still have that Mudkip,
Right.
and it's on, well, not Pokemon Online, or what's the
Oh,
thing?
Bang,
Yeah,
right,
I have
Bang.
it on Bang, and I can't use it for anything. That kind of sucks, but I just want to have access to it. So I don't mind having home as long as I know I still can have it in a future game,
Yeah.
or that there's a place that it exists and it's not just lost on a cartridge somewhere.
So you're not optimistic about there being better integration between home and a future game?
No, I mean if they do it, that's cool, but I'm not getting my hopes up with Game Freak and Nintendo.
Yeah, I mean, so where do you see Game Freak going? I mean, there's a lot of theories out there. Game Freak obviously being 1/3 of the Pokemon company. Some fans are speculating that they're feeling the heat in the sense that in terms of the Pokemon revenue, their contribution is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And in theory, Nintendo could get another developer to make a Pokemon game. I mean, I guess they have technically with the spin-offs.
Yeah.
And some people are saying, with Game Freak feeling insecure, Pokemon Go is actually the game that's driving most of the Pokemon game's revenue, and Game Freak didn't develop that game, right? So they might be, as a developer, kind of more focused on floating themselves as a studio, right?
Yeah.
Which is why, for example, they went and developed Sword and Shield while simultaneously putting their most senior developers on the game that no one's heard of. Although Toby Fox made the music for Town Hero, so I mean that alone, I guess I'm not gonna play it, but
Okay. By the way, he also did music for Sword and Shield.
he did. This guy is awesome. This isn't a Toby Fox like fan podcast, but like the guy is just amazing. My hat's off to him. Just really cool guy.
Yeah,
And it's cool that
was
he's
talking
like
about
has
it on Twitter. He like just asked. He's like, I would love to work on making music for a Pokemon game one day, and they're like,
why
sure,
not?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay, so I don't know if you saw one of my older videos. It was about Pokemon Prism and Nintendo's reactions to fan projects, and the idea of Nintendo kind of C&Ding basically everything out of existence.
Yeah. I remember this.
Toby Fox was like, I mentioned him as a paradigmatic example of what could happen if a studio were to embrace somebody who, because Undertale is basically based off a ROM hack called Earthbound Halloween Edition.
Yeah.
And I imagine if Nintendo had heard of it and they C&D'd him, he might have a very different relationship with Nintendo today. And so, like, the idea of kind of like celebrating fans, I don't know, is something Nintendo hasn't really done.
I feel like they've gotten more open to it in the past couple years, like not only celebrating fans, but also being open to working with other development studios and like third parties. Like before this generation, they've been very closed to everybody else, and it's been kind of sad. Like even Sega was more open than they've been ever.
Some people have argued that Sega has an incentive given that they're not doing as well. I mean, I don't know if that's really like warranted, but that definitely is true. Nintendo's been very, I guess, conservative about how they approach both video games and like, I guess, video game fan management. I know it's not really a term, but they've been very kind of leery about any non-authorized access to their IPs. I think I talked about Bowser's Teacup and that video I was talking about where some Nintendo executives went to Disney during Wreck-It Ralph, and Bowser had like a 3-second scene, and they had some substantial input about how Bowser sipped his tea. Something he's known for, by the way.
Yeah. Because they want proper representation of their characters in other media. I get where they're coming from. It's their IP. They want to protect it. But sometimes the lengths they go to are a little extreme.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think about Game Freak as a whole? I mean, like, my take is that, so a lot of the Sword and Shield controversy is, I guess, warranted in the sense that with this being a major console release, maybe the expectations were a bit higher for what the Pokemon, what bar Game Freak should be setting. But I don't know. Like, I feel Game Freak's pretty much the same studio, right? I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't say it's a tiny studio, but it's not the largest studio, and they're making like the same style of games that they've been making since Red and Blue. Like, there's nothing new here. It's just, I feel like people had an expectation because we're finally getting a console experience.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they were expecting something like Coliseum or Battle Revolution.
Yeah.
And I mean, those games are pretty expansive, but they didn't have, they didn't include really, I mean, I guess Coliseum did.
It had
RPG,
a campaign.
Like a major story campaign that's supposed to last for at least 18 hours. Right. I don't really remember how long it took me to beat Coliseum. It's been so long.
About maybe a little less than 20, yeah.
Okay, so I guess like I guess like Sonority did a good job with Coliseum, but I don't know. I don't know if the comparisons are exactly fair.
Like, here's the thing with Coliseum, like, it was a 3D game, but a lot of those models and animations were ripped from the Stadium game.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, so they already got help on that front, and they didn't have to develop all the mechanics and stuff of Pokemon.
Right.
All of that was like pre-developed for them by Game Freak. It was just, let's implement it and put it into a 3D engine. Right.
That's basically what I was getting at. Like, Coliseum definitely is a great, phenomenal work, but the situation is not exactly the same. I suppose, though, if Game Freak had a little bit more time, they may have done a better job. I think it's part of the problem.
Yeah, like, I feel like the Pokemon cycle is the problem, because, like, they have to release the game, they have to release the anime, they have to release a new card set, and if the new anime is supposed to be early December, the new game has to be mid-November, which was like their usual target for a new Pokemon release anyway. So, like, you can't delay it because all this other stuff is dependent on Pokemon video game coming out first.
Right. Now, some people have a theory that, like, they're going to iterate the inclusion of the national decks, basically. So some people are just saying, specifically Still Spectre, I think I saw a video of his, like, about 2 days ago. He's like, maybe next they're going to do a Diamond Pearl remake, maybe even in a Let's Go style, because people are readily consuming this sort of, like, streamlined content, which is obviously going to annoy the more hardcore Pokemon fans, but it's selling. But anyway, they're going to do a DP remake where they're going to add old Pokemon, and then there's going to be a Sword and Shield Ultra, whatever, dual version upgrade that will have probably all of the missing content, quote unquote, which it seems that that's like a viable way of doing it. I don't know, like, obviously from a consumer standpoint, it sucks that, if they are effectively garden walling off the Pokemon simply because they can make a future version with all the Pokemon, it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if it is a case, then I guess there might be a Sword and Shield game that, at least in terms of Pokemon, like, being in the game, will be more complete.
Well, okay, here, first of all, is it okay if I talk about spoilers on this tab?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay. So, in general, I'm actually pro Pokemon sequel games because, like, or, like, third versions, because, like, Emerald is definitely the best version of the Ruby and Sapphire era. Platinum is like the best version of Pearl and Diamond. Black and White 2 is the best version of Black and White. because of the post game stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And Sword and Shield basically does not have post game. Once you finish the league, like all you have left is finish your decks, shiny hunt, and build teams.
That's basically everyone's complaining about Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
It's from what I've heard.
And like I'm cool with that. Like I finished Pokemon. I can be done. There are other games I have to play, but if I wanted to play more Pokemon, there's nothing. Like I went to the Battle Tower, and in like 3 hours I maxed it out in both singles and doubles.
That's kind of sad. Yeah, nothing has, I think, rivaled the Battle Frontier of Emerald, which has been a phenomenal experience. I still have flashbacks to it.
And then, like, if they made a new version, I would assume that they would include more Pokemon, and they would add the post-game content that's lacking in Sword and Shield. But to be honest, I don't really want to replay the Sword and Shield campaign again just to get to that bonus content, because it was so lackluster to me.
Yeah.
Like, the worst part of the campaign is like I felt like I was going through at least on the routes, it was just a straight line the entire time.
I've heard people literally compare it to corridors. Is that like accurate to say, or is that like
I would say they're
exaggerating?
It's like the wild area, you can go in any direction and you can move the camera, but the wild area is not that big.
Right.
But the actual routes are pretty much corridors. Like you can avoid most Pokemon encounters, because like there's a bunch of overworld Pokemon, so you can just walk around them. And then with the grass encounters, it's actually kind of easy to avoid the exclamation mark where they would appear in the grass.
Right.
So it's basically a straight line, and then either there's a trainer in your way, and if you keep going down the straight line, you fight the trainer, or you go through the grass and manage to avoid them if you want to do that. And there are only, I feel like, 2 or 3 routes that are actually interesting. There's one route that's like you're climbing a mountain and there's like ladders going up and down. It's not even that complicated, but it was like,
relative to everything else. Yeah.
And then there's one area where you first get the water bike. So in this game, they've removed HMs completely, and they've also removed Pokemon Ride and just integrated all those features into your bike.
Your bike? Oh, while your bike can fly, or what?
Well, there's a taxi system, so whenever you're outside, you can just call a taxi to any town.
Oh, okay.
But the surfing and your basic field movements all on your bike. So once you get the water bike, there's like a small water area with different directions you can go, but I mean, even that's still limited. And comparing that to, say, going to Mount Silver in Fire Red Leaf Green,
right?
Or was that?
No, that's
Heart Gold Soul Silver
and Gold and Silver.
Yeah, and Gold and Silver. It's like going to Mount Silver, or going. What's the place you fight Red in? I'm not Red. Oh no, is it Red in?
Well, Red. Well, it is. It is Mount Silver.
No, but there's another fight you get to do in Fire Red Leaf Green in the Sevi Islands.
Oh yeah. I don't know who you. Crap, I'm blanking on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played them since launch. But yeah,
it's been a while,
but like there's like places in the Sevi Islands you can fight people. There's like that place you go find Steven and Emerald.
Right.
Like there are actual areas that are dungeons with like puzzles, not complicated puzzles. Like it's still a kids game, but there's like
content.
There's content.
Something besides, yeah.
Yeah, the game lacks content. That's the issue. Like it's not that the game is bad, it's that it's kind of shallow. And if you just want a shallow Pokemon experience, it's fine at that, and it's easier to play it that way more than ever. And if
you put 100 hours into it. Like some people would say, like, how could you call it shallow? Like, I mean, clearly you enjoyed your time with the game, right?
Yeah. Yes, I had a lot of fun, but like, if I just wanted to play through the story and just get through it as fast as possible, I could have done it in 10 or 15 hours.
Yeah.
The only reason I have that much time in the game is I enjoy catching Pokemon, I enjoy breeding, I enjoy getting like good IVs, I wanted to trade with my friends, I've been doing raids with my friends. If I didn't have friends to play Pokemon with, I would have been done.
I imagine this would be a very boring experience, honestly. Yeah, I've been people talking about the online features being kind of bare bones, especially compared to like Sun and Moon, or even X and Y.
Yeah, the online is a mess. Like I remember,
although that's kind of standard fare for not to poo Nintendo, but it's standard fare for Nintendo.
Yeah, but they've made choices in this game that they're trying to fix the online, and it's made it worse. Like, I just wanted to day one, I wanted to trade with my friend. So he had a version exclusive. He had made it to the one of the later forest areas where you catch Ponyta, and I had Farfetch'd, and they're both version exclusives. He had Shield, I had Sword. And so we wanted to trade because I wanted to have a Rapidash on my team when I fought the Elite Four, and I was getting close. So we were like, okay, how do I trade? So I hit the button to go online, and I opened up a trade. But if you hit trade, it just starts a random trade with anybody in the world. And we're like, okay, that's kind of dumb. Fine. I have to be careful and set a link code. So then I set a link code to trade with my friend. And we both put in a link code, but we put in some digits that were, I guess, common enough. And since millions of people were playing launch day, if you put in something common enough, anybody with that same code can join you. So my friend accidentally traded away a Pokemon to somebody else that wasn't me because we didn't know each other's characters' name yet. And there's no option to just, I want to play with my friend, I want to trade with my friend, I want to battle with my friend. You have to do a link code. And I guess the idea is you don't need to be friends with someone
to do this,
but not having any friend integration at all makes it kind of annoying.
Right. Everyone's basically a stranger.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I don't know if you have any, have you played Pokemon ROM hacks?
I've played a little bit. I can't remember what it's called. All I remember is it's the ROM hack that you start off with, a snowy area. So there's, a bunch of ice Pokemon. It's based off of the Gen 3 engine, but it has...
I know there's a game called Pokemon Frostbite, but I don't think that's what you're talking
about.
about.
It's not Frostbite. I just know it was kind of popular a few years ago. It actually had, a story that people thought was, well written. I can't remember what it's called right now off the top of my head, because I don't play too many Pokemon ROM hacks. To be honest, the most I do for playing modded games are fighting game stuff. But if I'm playing Pokemon, I'm just playing a base game or I'm playing on Showdown.
I mean, I'm thinking about ROM hacks here because ROM hacks are pretty interesting, I guess, case study into kind of the types of innovations that Game Freak could do, in theory, do to Pokemon games. I've been looking into a ROM hack called Clear Crystal, which is just a hack of Crystal version.
Okay.
Clear Crystal is pretty interesting in that it's effectively the first open world Pokemon game, at least 2D Game Boy Color open world.
Okay.
So this guy took Crystal version, and you can start pretty much in any town. You choose Johto or Kanto. You could go to the gyms in any order.
Okay.
You could choose from, I think, up to 20 Pokemon as your starter. And so some starters make the game hard. I think Smeargle is one of the starters you could choose.
Oh, that's hard. That's cool though. Oh, wait, does it only have the original 252 from Crystal?
I think it's only original 252, yeah.
Or is it 251 from Crystal? I think it's 251.
It's 251, yeah. But I mean, these features are kind of what many players. Oh, and there's also because you can go to the gym leaders in any order. Every gym leader has a specific set of Pokemon. So set 5 might be level 60 Pokemon. Set 4 might be level 40 Pokemon. So you literally can challenge. It's like adding roguelike features to Pokemon, basically.
Out of curiosity, for encounters, are the encounters level locked by where you are in the game?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's all pretty intuitive stuff. It's a very well thought out kind of modular Pokemon experience.
I love that idea, but I feel like it sounds like it'd be difficult to balance between where people would start and what starters they get. Like having access to something really strong super early in the game.
I think the game's probably more for people who've played Crystal before. I don't know. I mean, maybe Game Freak couldn't implement this for a brand new generation.
Mm-hmm.
But if this were a released remastered Pokemon Crystal, I think a lot of fans would be happy. And it's pretty. I mean, dare I say, groundbreaking what this hack does for Pokemon, especially considering that it's all done with a 2D ROM image or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of I guess like innovation is kind of cool to see from fans. Um, it's just pretty interesting to see how like fans see Pokemon and how Game Freak sees Pokemon, in that kind of way. Like there are other ROM hacks that have kind of similar kind of interesting mechanics and additions to the Pokemon series, or even Temtem.
Yeah.
We were talking about Temtem a little bit before the talk started.
Yeah, I like Temtem conceptually. I don't feel like it's quite there yet, but they're in the right path.
So for those of you who don't know, Temtem is basically a Kickstarter project for a monster battling franchise. Who's the studio that made it?
Oh my goodness, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah,
have
I
to look
mean,
that up.
you can probably Google it. It's a pretty it's a game that's going to be launched on Steam. It's on the Discord store, so it's not like we're talking about some kind of just a Pokemon ROM hack here. It's an actual franchise that's going to be up and coming. And Temtem integrates like some pretty standard Pokemon features with some new features that I think people might consider good quality of life changes were games to have implemented them into Sword and Shield or whatever future Pokemon games that might exist. Like the ability to play co-op with people, streamline type disadvantages and advantages, the ability to kind of choose Pokemon from like a draft or roster instead of having to choose play with the same 6 every time you are out in the world, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the changes they're making to the formula are healthy for that style of game in general. Like, and I feel like it distinguishes itself from Pokemon enough that people who are Pokemon fans can find enjoyment in it. I don't know if it's different enough to entice new people, though. That's my only issue.
I don't think it's different enough. What I think this is as I talked about in like that video I mentioned a while back, the Pokemon Prison video. You've got a lot of fans, taking risks with franchises that they love, and you don't see the developers doing the same. Like Pokemon Prism, which was threatened with the C&D, right? Added a ton of features that were Game Freak to have implemented into Pokemon years ago. Cool Boy Man or whoever wouldn't have made the ROM hack, right? So I think part of the reason why Temtem exists is because Game Freaks failed to take advantage of their own world and make these types of changes to their series, and so imitators can come along and do that and create a new IP, and suddenly you can't C&D them because it's a new IP.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe with some people being frustrated with Sword and Shield, they'll find some solace in Temtem and they won't look back. I don't know.
I mean, I'm hoping that Temtem becomes popular because it has a lot of stuff that I wish Pokemon would implement. Like, I would like to play co-op with my friends. And then the social stuff they added in Temtem feels like what they've been trying to do with the wild area in Sword and Shield, but it's not.
Temtem looks like one giant wild area.
Yeah,
honestly.
like everything.
Like if you're really excited by the wild area in Pokemon Sword and Shield, you should play Temtem because it basically is like.
I mean, except for the overworld Pokemon, like it's still grass encounters. Like if you don't like that, I guess, but like the being able to like talk and communicate with like everybody playing in your server. Like, is very similar to like playing Pokemon in the wild area, being online, having access to. Except you can actually talk to those people instead of just seeing stickers. You can easily trade with those people instead of having to put in codes and being annoyed with the system.
Right.
It fixes a lot of the things that I feel is just lacking in Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the developer is Crema, CREMA. Oh, and Humble Bundle is publishing, which is kind of
I knew Humble Bundle was publishing because I think they had a few press releases about it, but I learned about Temtem I think through you, but when I was googling about it, because it looked like a pretty interesting project.
Oh, I heard about it through PokeTubers actually, who were fed up with Pokemon.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is exactly the type of disgruntled cycle I was kind of predicting in my last video. I mean, Pokemon's not going away. That much is obviously clear, but there'll probably be some drop off because of this, and there are going to be creators who either make fan projects. Like I know me personally, I'm going to probably stick to playing Pokemon ROM hacks. I'm pretty satisfied with even just playing old remakes of Pokemon games like Crystal Clear, but you've got these other developers taking risk with their IPs or with similar enough IPs, and it's kind of like it's a little bit disappointing that Game Freak's not taking the same risk, but it is what it is.
Yeah, like I feel like I understand where Game Freak is coming from because they know what sells, so you don't want to diverge from that too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I want to definitely talk about in this discussion is that, you know, if there's anything we've learned from this whole, I don't want to call it like a debacle or like conflict, but like the I guess the disagreement that fans are having over this game. I don't think Game Freak is innovative. Game Freak has never been innovative. They've been very consistent. They've been, they're good at iterating, building on concepts. Sometimes, like we were saying earlier, like they take away concepts that doesn't really make any sense, but pretty much, like, I mean, you would say the quality of life changes in Sword and Shield, the ones that were building up on what the formula has done, are pretty solid, right?
Yeah, like I love it, but then they also took away both things competitively and casually that I don't understand. Like in Gen 5, they added the concept of like adding capsules to your Pokeballs, and you can have like special effects and stuff, and like because of that, I got into I want to catch my favorite Pokemon in this Pokeball that matches and give it like effects that match the theming that I want this Pokemon to have. So like I have more customization, not just with my character, but the Pokemon I'm battling with. But then they take that customization away.
Right.
Or I appreciate having Pokemon following me. Like this is my partner. I have attachment to it. But then they take it away. You
know, actually, the guy doing Crystal Clear is trying to do Pokemon following you in that game. Pretty ambitious, considering that I think I want to say it's a 2-guy team, but I think after fans found out about the game, they're trying to help out. But it's pretty, again, ambitious that this guy's doing that. I mean, I guess you're learning not to get attached to any one feature in Pokemon.
Yeah.
The features that stay in Pokemon, they get built up and they get worked on to the point where they're perfected, and I think that's something we can commend Game Freak about. But in terms of innovation, that's something that I think Game Freak's never illustrated, and that's something that Pokemon fans, like I've said with ROM hacks and even brand new IPs like Temtem have shown that they are willing to take more risk or to experiment or whatever. And maybe part of this is because the development cycle is constrained for Game Freak. Like obviously, even though some of these ROM hacks have been made by 1-man or 2-man teams, but they have no time constraints. Yeah, I mean, like they can do anything, right? And they're also kind of working off of existing code. I mean, maybe that's not the case with Temtem, or maybe some other more ambitious ROM hacks, but for the most part, though, Game Freak has constraints that other developers of these fan projects just don't have.
But I mean, there's also features that they implemented that are not that hard to bring back. Like at the end of Black and White, there's for White version, there was like a way to replay the game in like an easy mode, and in Black version, there's a hard mode like built into the game.
Right.
And there are people who find Pokemon too easy. Like I'm one of them, and I'm fine with that. Pokemon's supposed to be an easy franchise, but having the option to make the game more difficult is cool. And what they've done now is just
they've implemented the easy mode permanently.
Yeah.
Permanent easy mode. Yeah, I mean, people were talking about a toggle for the experience share. I mean, I think their headspace just isn't with like the I don't want to even say hardcore, because I think even like average players might find the game too easy too.
Yeah.
But their headspace is optimizing the game for like the most casual gamer, not in a pejorative way. I mean, literally, like the game is so accessible that it appeals to everyone. Yeah.
I mean,
because you'll tolerate the game because you like the franchise, even though you're looking for a more challenging experience. And somebody who's either never played Pokemon or somebody who simply loves Pokemon because it's Pokemon can enjoy the game now without having to worry about type advantages or any of the more like difficult aspects of Pokemon.
Yeah, like I feel like the best example of this in the game is they added casual control mode, which, to be honest, I love this, but it's a perfect example of what we're talking about, where they added a mode where you can play the game with just one hand. They're trying to make it as accessible as possible.
Is this like one Joy-Con or what?
Yeah, like, okay. So the way it works is they just changed the controls so that you can play with either one Joy-Con. So both of the control sticks will control movement. The D-pad or the buttons will be your buttons for it. So like doing certain things is really simple. Like if I want to lay in bed and read and just have like my Switch in tabletop mode, I can do that while I'm doing something else.
Right.
So like I appreciate them implementing that and making it even easier to play casually, or easier or more accessible for people who can't like use like a normal controller like that.
Right.
But they're implementing stuff like that, but also not hitting the other end of adding stuff to make the game more interesting or difficult.
The longevity of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I am concerned about is the longevity of these new Pokemon games. Like, they, at least right now, feel like they're going to be press and forget. You'll have maybe at most a few 100 hours of fun. I know 100 hours, but like most of that is going to be like grinding, right? Looking for shinies, right? If that's what you're counting as playtime, I mean, it's not really, you're not really engaging with content. You're just doing something to kind of perfect the process, right? Like if you have to grind to level 100 to beat a game, for example, right? I wouldn't consider that content. It's something that is elective on the player, right? So in terms of content, yeah, I'm kind of concerned that these games are going to be kind of like press and forget.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that maybe, you know, like on the other end, right? Maybe the meta is going to be more friendly, and in terms of online play, maybe that is what's going to kind of change the way Pokemon's enjoyed. I don't know. Like, are you ultimately optimistic? Or I know I asked you this earlier, but like just putting it all together, like
overall, I think it's a good game. I enjoyed my experience, and if you're a fan of Pokemon, you should pick it up. There's no reason to boycott it or anything, but if you want more, like, it's not the best value for the dollar. Like, if you want to play an in-depth RPG on the Switch, there are other options that are the same price.
Or Temtem.
Or Temtem. No,
we're not shills for Temtem, but Temtem.
Yeah, there are other options, but if you love Pokemon, this is Pokemon. It's not missing the Pokemon feeling. It's just the dungeon design is not there because there are no dungeons. The routes are kind of simple. The game is very streamlined. It is kind of ugly in some places. I'll admit there are some really beautiful animations. If you haven't seen it, go look up Cinderace, the final form of the Firestarter. His signature move is one of the best animations I've seen Game Freak ever do. It's really cool. He like takes a rock and like kicks it like it's a soccer ball. And like takes the fireball out. They've definitely put some work into stuff, but there are points where you can see that a lot of stuff is lacking.
Yeah. So does it feel like a guided tour, or like certain things are nice but certain things are not? So you're saying like do the new Pokemon have more attention and care than old Pokemon? Is that fair to say? Or
I would say they went out of their way to make some really interesting new designs. Like I really enjoy some of the new Pokemon like Toxtricity or Hatterene. Like they have new really cool typings like Dark and Fairy.
Right.
They've mixed up a lot of the way Pokemon like stats and moves work together. Like they're with what's the new Dark and Fairy? Grimmsnarl. The way they did his stat distribution and moves and abilities, I'm like, there are so many different ways I can use this Pokemon. I've spent like hours just thinking of how I could fit him on multiple teams, and then I was looking at people on YouTube, and like I've seen like 6 or 7 different variations of the exact same Pokemon played different ways, and I was like, I haven't seen that much diversity in a single Pokemon in like the longest time.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, so I think that's gonna be it. Do you have any final thoughts? Like, anything you want to say?
If you enjoy Pokemon, go enjoy Pokemon. If you don't. You don't have to. Don't hate on the game if you're not gonna pick it up. But if you're enjoying it, you don't have to listen to the people who are hating on it.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say as somebody who's like somewhat neutral, like, don't be sad because, well, the fans have, I think, for me at least, been the most phenomenal part of Pokemon. My experience has mostly been with Pokemon ROM hacks. I grew up going to a site called Zofar's Domain. My first Pokemon game aside from Pokemon Red was Pokemon Brown, and that is a phenomenal ROM hack. I would tell you to check it out. And so look into Pokemon fan projects. Look into games like Temtem, which are taking up the mantle of, I guess, hardcore Pokemon and doing something with it. And I mean, Game Freak unfortunately is part of a machine, and we're not going to be able to change that. Even if you're mad at Game Freak, even if you think they could do better, they could be more innovative. Like they're a small studio with constraints. Now, it could be the case that maybe one day Nintendo is going to hire someone to do a more ambitious undertaking with Pokemon, but for the time being, I would just say, if you're disappointed with Sword and Shield, ride it out with these other cool fan projects.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, that's going to be it. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Mikamu out.
Thank you for having me.